Thank you for that introduction. And hello, everybody. So we are changing gears, and we're going to be talking about how we can develop feed programs for our broodmares as they transition to performance horses. So the talk outline, we will first discuss determining the nutritional needs of the mare. The majority of the talk will talk about energy balance, so how we can assess the horse's energy status, if they're an easy or hard keeper, and then why it is so important to feed the right amount of energy or calories to support performance. We'll talk about selecting the right feed program, and then touch on implementation and monitoring how the horse responds to our feed program. So as we introduce exercise, that will change the nutritional needs of the horse. That may increase calorie and nutrient requirements if that mare was out at pasture and maintenance doing little activity. However, it may also reduce the calorie and nutrient requirements compared to lactation. So if they've just weaned a foal, they're actually going to have some lower calorie and nutrient requirements. Whenever possible, when we're talking about creating a new feed program or we have a new horse, we want to ask questions about the previous diet or management. So this can give us a baseline of their nutrition, how much they need to maintain the current body condition. So we want to ask questions about the type and amount of forage, and also ideally the type and amounts of feed that were being offered. We then want to evaluate the horse's current weight and body condition score. So we want to assess if they're at their ideal weight and condition, or if they may be a little underweight or overweight. We then want to consider the mare's age and any health concerns. So if we've got an older mare, there might be some senior horse nutrition concerns that we need to think about, and then also some metabolic conditions that were mentioned earlier, such as insulin dysregulation or Cushing's and PPID. These will impact our nutrition recommendations. So the main goal with providing the right feed program is supplying enough calories or energy, interchangeable, and I probably will switch back between calories and energy, but they are the same or referencing the same thing. So we want to provide the right amount of calories in the diet to maintain an ideal body weight and body condition score. And this is a balance between energy provided by the diet and then also the energy being expended from activity or their performance exercise. And to achieve our management goals, whether that's maintaining, losing, or gaining, we can manipulate those through the diet and also increasing or decreasing exercise. A factor that we can't really modify is the keeper status of that mare. So that's if they're an easy or a hard keeper, and that's an important factor because that does change or determine how we will feed them and their energy requirements. So what does keeper status mean? Keeper status describes the horse's metabolic status. So we often refer to an easy keeper being a horse that needs less calories to maintain its weight. So those horses that we term living on air. Whereas a hard keeper on the opposite end of the scale has a much higher calorie need to maintain weight. So above average feed amount to maintain the weight. And understanding keeper status really gives us an idea of how much feed is needed to maintain the horse's current body weight and condition. And it also helps us select the right type of feed to supply calories and also nutrients in that allotted amount of feed. So when we think of an easy keeper, we're probably thinking mostly forage, maybe with a small amount of feed, versus a hard keeper that we might be feeding a lot more concentrate feed. So one way that we can assess the energy status of the horse is by using body condition scoring. And this is an evaluation of how much fat that horse has, so their stored body fat. And it's a really easy way to assess if the energy intake from the diet is meeting their caloric requirements. So we can think if we're looking at a horse that's too thin or under condition, that diet's not supplying enough calories. If they're too fat, the diet's supplying too many calories. Whereas if they're in a moderate or healthy weight, then the diet is providing enough calories to meet their requirement. And there are two scoring systems to evaluate body condition scoring in the US. the Henneke scoring system is commonly used, and that's on a scale of 1 to 9, with 1 being very poor, very underweight, through to 9, which is extremely fat. The other score was developed in Australia and is used in Australia and some other places around the world, and that uses a scale of 0 being very poor to 5 being very fat. So when we talk about body condition score, it's really important to know which scoring system you're using, because a 5 on the Henneke is moderate, whereas that's 5 is very fat on the Australian system. So when we body condition score using the Henneke system, there's 6 key areas that we both look at and feel. And for those areas, we will then assign a score of 1 to 9 and take an average. So 5 on the Henneke score is moderate, and for an ideal body condition score for broodmares, we often say that's between a 5 and a 7, so between moderate or fleshy. And that's really because research has suggested that slightly heavier condition score or extra fat deposits actually help support reproductive health. Whereas for our riding horses or performance horses, the ideal body condition score is slightly lower at a 5 to 6, or a moderate to moderately fleshy condition. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in the arena session, but the key areas that we look at for body condition scoring is over the ribs, behind the shoulder, over the neck, the withers, over the back, and then at the tail head. So why is the correct body condition important? It's because it influences performance. So horses that are over-conditioned, carrying extra body fat stores, that actually causes more stress on their joints. This might be an issue if they're an older horse that has some arthritis. It also affects their ability to cool after exercise and could overall reduce their level of performance too. Whereas a horse that is under-conditioned, that doesn't have a lot of body fat stores, actually might not have enough energy or fuel to actually perform. So really the ideal range is in the middle. So a moderate amount, they've got enough body fat stores to support exercise, performance, and recovery, and also be in a healthy range. So it's also important to consider how much that horse weighs in addition to their body condition score. And why is it important to know how much your horse weighs? It's because we make feeding recommendations based on weight. So a common feeding recommendation or direction on a feed bag may be feed 0.5 to 1.5 pounds of feed per 100 pounds of body weight. So if you have a 1,000-pound horse, which oftentimes we think of horses being 1,000 pounds or 1,100 pounds, that would be 5 to 15 pounds a day. So it's quite a big range, but also there's not a lot of 1,000 or 1,100 pound broodmares out there, or thoroughbred broodmares out there. So if we assume that they're 1,000 pounds, then we actually can underfeed them and really find ourselves undersupplying key vitamins and minerals if we do that. There are several ways that we can weigh our horses. So the most accurate is using a scale. This isn't always the most practical, so then we can use other methods such as the weight tape, or even using a tape measure where you measure certain measurements on the horse and use an equation to calculate the body weight, and that's really important. So then when we think about combining these two, body weight and body condition score, we have an assessment of their energy status, but it's also important to know how we can move up and down that body condition scale. So research studies have looked at how much of a weight change is needed to move up or down a body condition score. And these differ slightly between the research studies, but in general, approximately 50 to 75 pounds of body weight is either needed to be gained or lost to move a body condition score. So we've now assessed our horse's current body condition, their body weight, and we've also determined if they either need to maintain, lose, or gain. And so now we're thinking about how we can achieve that through the right feed program. So the goal with our feed program is to feed to achieve ideal body weight and condition. So how do we do that? First of all, we need to select suitable forages, both the type and the quality. And when we talk about quality, that really means how much energy or calories that forage is providing. So we can think about grass hay being slightly lower in calories compared to alfalfa, which again would be slightly lower compared to really lush pasture. We also want to feed as much forage as possible. Now this will depend on the individual horse, because we can't always feed as much forage as possible. Sometimes we have to restrict the amount of forage and the type of forage. We then need to fill in the gaps provided from the forage by selecting the right feed that supplies both calories and nutrients. So nutrients being additional protein, vitamins, and minerals. It is also really important to feed by weight and not volume. So ideally, we need to measure and weigh the hay and the feed so we know how much we're providing on a weight basis. Because again, our feeding recommendations are based on weight and also the horse's body weight. So knowing the weight is very important. And then regular assessment. We want to make sure we regularly assess the horse so we know how they're responding to the diet and to be able to make timely adjustments so we're again achieving their ideal body weight and condition over time. So as we're talking about transitioning broodmares to performance horses, it's important to think about determining their workload. And so the National Research Council in 2007 published the nutrient requirements of horses, and in that they provided a guideline for categorizing different workloads. So this slide shows the difference between light, moderate, and heavy. And as you can see, there's an increase in the amount of exercise, so how often per week or how long per week the horses are in work. There's also an increase in the amount of time they spend at those faster gaits. So light work, you're going to be mostly trotting, walking and trotting, versus when you get up into moderate, you're doing more trotting, cantering, and also you're introducing some more discipline-specific training, so sort of jumping or specific dressage movements. So how do we feed a horse in light work? These horses, if they're easy keepers and also just entering in a training program, their calorie and nutrient requirements aren't going to be that different from maintenance. So we have to be really careful that we don't overestimate their workload and then overfeed these horses. So we may have to consider restricting forage. So if they're out on pasture, we may need to use a grazing muzzle. When we're selecting what type of hay to feed, we're going to look for using a grass hay versus alfalfa, and that's because the grass hay has fewer calories, so we can feed more of it. And then also looking at moderate quality versus a high quality forage. Again, feeding fewer calories, but being able to increase time spent eating and increase chewing. When we're having to restrict forage or we're looking to minimize calories, it really is important to weigh the hay and also slow down rate of intake, so using slow feeders, so slow feeding hay nets, so we can, again, increase time spent eating, increase the amount of chewing that horse does, and that then supports their digestive health, but also their behavior. So these horses in light work generally can get most of their calories met by forage alone, whether that's pasture or hay, and so then we just need to pick a feed that fills in all those gaps that forage is lacking. So often we'll think about feeding a ration balancer. That's a lower intake feed, so it's highly concentrated in both protein, vitamins, and minerals, and it doesn't add a lot of extra calories. A common mistake, because it's so easy to overestimate the amount of work they're doing, and also potentially if they're easy keepers or not, is we find people select a performance feed, and then because the calorie need isn't so high, they then feed a lesser amount than it was designed to be fed. So they're feeding to meet calories, but they're not feeding to provide the right amount of vitamins and minerals. So one way we can do that is either switch to a ration balancer, or we can use a very concentrated vitamin and mineral supplement to top off that small amount of concentrate and provide a balanced diet. So some things to consider as the workload actually increases. So we're taking that horse from light work and maybe moving to moderate and doing some competitions. So as the workload increases, so does the calorie and nutrient requirements. And also keep in mind that if you have a hard keeper, they may have higher calorie and nutrient requirements even at lower exercise levels. So we can do this by several ways, but a common way is actually selecting a performance feed that is more calorie dense and also designed to be fed at a higher intake rate. So we're adding a performance feed. This is going to supply additional calories. It also will supply the additional vitamins and minerals to meet the higher workload. If we weren't feeding a ration balancer before and we were feeding a more traditional concentrate, then as we increase the workload, we're often going to increase feed intake to meet calories, and that in turn will increase the amount of vitamins and minerals provided. When we're thinking about feeding the performance horse, we can feed to meet the types of exercise. So if we had a horse that was in dressage training, doing low intensity, long duration, the feed that we may select for them may have more fat and fiber ingredients, so more calories are coming from the fat and the fiber, and that will support the type of exercise that they're doing. And as we're changing workload, it's really important to monitor their body condition so we can assess the appropriateness of both the amount of feed we're giving and the feed type. So if their body condition score, either they're gaining or they're losing, then that tells us that we need to make adjustments to our feed program. So we discussed feeding the horse in light work, but how would we approach a horse that's in more moderate work? So we have progressed in the retraining and then maybe entering some competitions. As the moderate workload is more intense, the calorie need is higher, so we don't often have to restrict forage. So here we may be able to offer more free choice access to forage. We're also going to seek out higher calorie forages, so high quality pasture. We might feed more alfalfa, and also a high quality grass hay can be offered. Depending on your area, getting high quality forage products might be challenging. So here we can use pelleted or cubed hay products to supplement our forages. And this is an important consideration if we have a senior mare, and they may have some dental issues. They might not be able to chew their forage as well. So providing a processed forage that's got a shorter fiber length, that actually improves their digestibility and chewing, and is a great way to provide them with calories from fiber and forage. We're going to look for a performance feed, and these are typically higher in calories compared to some other feeds, such as the maintenance. And you'll find that these often have added fat. So we'll be looking for feeds that have 6 to 10% fat, and they utilize high quality fiber sources. So providing fermentable fiber, it gives them a digestible source of energy, but it also supports overall digestive health and also maybe their trainability and their behavior. So looking for things that have beet pulp or soybean hulls. Some horses, if they are a hard keeper or they're working very hard, we may need to look to different or supplying additional fat and calories. So looking at supplemental fat that we can top dress on our performance feed. So we're adding more calories without really increasing the feed intake. And we can do this by adding some vegetable oil, such as soybean or canola, or we can look to add a fat supplement, such as stabilized rice bran. And stabilized rice bran has a good reputation of adding condition and bloom to a horse, and that can be very beneficial. So coming to the end, thinking about implementation and monitoring of how we change our feed program, we want to make these changes very gradual. And we also want to really assess their energy level. So we need to determine, do they need to lose weight? How much weight do they need to lose? And how are we going to achieve that? But also how long or what time frame we have to achieve that. So the more gradual and slow, the better. We also want to take the time every 1 to 2 weeks to evaluate body condition score and weight, and that will help us track and monitor the horse's progression. We want to record and track any changes, both from the horse and also if we make diet changes or management, we can then go back and look and see how those changes had an impact. And taking photos can be really beneficial because it can be challenging when you see the horse on a daily basis to notice those subtle changes. So looking at a photo over a longer period of time, you're probably going to notice the impact and use that to compare to your body condition scoring and the weight measurements that you're taking. And it's really important, so not every day do we need to weigh the hay and feed that we're providing, but it's good to take this time to periodically reweigh it and assess, are we still on the right track? Changes in the type of hay or the source or the bales, the flakes, that can all have a big impact over time, and we can start to see some creep in how much and how many calories we are actually providing. And when we take all of these steps, this allows us to really make timely adjustments. We're seeing the horse in front of us, we're assessing, are they doing well, are they maintaining, or do we need to make a tweak? And it allows us to make those adjustments, and then those adjustments can be much smaller and very effective. So there are lots of resources available out there. I do encourage owners to consult with a nutritionist or a feed representative to discuss their feeding program and have a ration evaluation conducted. There are lots of body condition score charts available. There's one from KER. There's also one on the website. And then also KER is a resource for you. So we have a lot of health and nutrition articles through Equinews. And then you can also reach out to us if you have any questions about your feeding program or your the health of your horse. And we can assist you with making the best feeding program as your horse transitions.
Thank you, Catherine. KER truly is a wonderful resource in this regard. We've referred makeover trainers over the years if they don't have a vet in their kind of orbit that can help them with nutritional issues. Having access to KER is a wonderful opportunity, and thoroughbred makeover participants have to achieve a minimum body condition score to complete the competition. So this is another great way to just make sure that you're hitting those benchmarks and that your horse is appropriately, in the right body condition score to be taking on the level of work that they are currently doing. I had some questions about kind of like frequency of checking in and adjusting your plan, but you got to that right there at the end. I did have a note about, are there any common nutritional deficiencies that should be monitored in broodmares as they're transitioning to a riding career?
So yes, I think it could be easy to not feed key vitamins and minerals. So we're often seeing they're meeting their calorie needs from the pasture or the forage. They're reducing the intake and feed if they're coming off weaning and not lactating. If we do that, we may shortchange them on some vitamins and minerals. So it's really important to think about that. It's harder to see if we're meeting their vitamin and mineral requirement compared to their calorie, because we can see that with their body condition score. But definitely making sure we're feeding the right feed to supply vitamins and minerals.
Do we have any questions in the room?
Kind of going off of that question, is there any other specific areas you want people to focus on in their first transitioning? I know we talked about a lot of potential foot problems when you're first getting them. Is that something you kind of keep an eye out when you're looking more into foot supplements?
So for the live stream, the question was, in this transition, are there any particular areas that you want to be specifically mindful about? If there are things, we know that changes in feet is something that we need to look out for in broodmares. Are there things that we can do to support that nutritionally or to troubleshoot that nutritionally?
Yes. So from a nutrition standpoint, it's important, again, to make sure we're providing a complete and balanced diet. So providing those key minerals that forage is lacking, so copper, zinc, iodine. And then once you have provided that balanced diet, some horses may benefit from an additional hoof supplement that provides some targeted nutrition, so something that has added biotin, potentially looking at the different sources of minerals, so using something that potentially has like zinc methionine in it, and that really can support hoof growth, so it can improve how fast the horse's hoof grows, so you can have more ability to trim and correct any changes. So that is something, but again, nutrition to support the hoof is a long-term investment, so it takes time. So you're going to improve the quality of the hoof at the top, and then that's going to grow out. So it really needs to be a combination of working with a good farrier on a regular basis, and then also supporting it with optimal nutrition.
Catherine, when you're working through, particularly in a big transition like this, I love the advice about kind of frequency of checking in. If you are hitting a point where you need to start kind of troubleshooting your feed plan, how much time do you want to give to see, like, is this supplement getting the result that I want? Or, is this grain the right selection? I think sometimes it's very easy with the number of options that are available out there to just kind of start flinging stuff at the wall and trying too many things at once. Are there any suggestions about just kind of like being a little bit more methodical in making those adjustments?
Absolutely. So I think you need to really evaluate the program as a whole, and then try and target certain areas and make one change at a time and give it enough time. I think some people sometimes, we get into a case of, oh, it's not working, but we may not have given it enough time to see that it was going to work. So those constant changes also can impact the horse and maybe actually put us further behind. So taking the time, make a change, and then from supplements, they take longer. So you probably, depending on what supplement, if it's a joint supplement, giving it sort of 4 to 6 weeks before you start to assess if it's working for the horse. When you're looking at changing maybe the forage, either the type or the amount or the feed, that might be a shorter term response. But again, I would still give it sort of 2 to 4 weeks before you decide I need to do something different.
Kyle, comments, or anybody else in the room?
I feel like I'm concerned to ask questions since I was away for a bit of this. But I think one of the things that you and I talked about a little bit before you spoke today too was just the way that a broodmare who's had several foals might be more wide sprung, so it might make their body condition look a little different. Did you cover that while I was out?
We briefly talked about body condition.
Yep.
In the arena demo, I was going to go a bit more into that, where
Perfect.
we can see the horse. But that is something, when we're looking at those broodmares, we don't really want to look at, like, a big belly doesn't really indicate that they're over-conditioned. So we really want to look at those different areas that we described, but understand that a broodmare that's had lots of foals is probably going to be wider sprung, looks like they're carrying a lot of weight in the abdomen, and that's really not the case. So, and as well, their top line is not probably going to look the best, and that makes it look even bigger in the belly. So assessing that and keeping that in mind.
After lactation, is there a sort of period where it takes for them to return back to that baseline nutrition requirements, or is it sort of after they dry off, it's quite immediate?
So the question for the live stream is, after lactation, how long would you give a mare to kind of return to normal baseline in terms of like metabolic processing?
So it's more of maybe how their feed program, so you're going to be feeding a lot differently for lactation than you would when they're more in a maintenance mode. But also each mare's differently. So sometimes when you change them, they will drop a lot of weight. Other mares might not really respond that quickly. So it's just assessing, again, the individual mare in front of you. But there will be big differences in how you feed for lactation versus maintenance.
I think one thing I see too a lot is that even when you're talking about a mare, obviously that's been retired from breeding, but during their nursing process, right? As the foal starts to grow, you usually need to change that nutritional, because again, it's what you see in front of you every single day, knowing it's going to be 2 to 4 weeks until I see a difference is usually what my experience has been without being a professional. I'm not licensed as a nutritionist. This is, just Kyle talking from personal experience. But, when our babies hit like a month old, I start to notice the mare actually starts to potentially drop condition because the foal's growing a lot faster. And so you start to have a bigger nutritional demand. I might need to change it up. And then by the time they hit 6 months old, if they still haven't been weaned, I might have to drop back down again. And then that body condition just shifts all the time. It's like a day-to-day, and I'm a picture person. I believe in take all the pictures of your horse every day from every angle. Don't be as obsessive as me and stare at them too long. But I like to overanalyze my horses, but I think it's good having a picture and marking a date on that picture, so then you can do a comparison in the future really easily. It makes a really big difference, especially when you're transitioning a horse to a new feed program.
I love the picture advice. I think that's great for our makeover trainers as well, who are managing a little bit of a different type of transition. If it's a retiring racehorse, there's really nothing that can give you the clear, objective view better than having that kind of visual record. Any other questions? Yes. So the question is, when you're managing such a significant transition for a broodmare, just kind of in terms of disruption to routine and handling and all of that sort of thing, we know when there's big disruption like that, horses can be more prone to ulcers. Is there anything that we can do kind of preventatively to support that?
Great question. So yes, there are management, and the diet can have a big impact. So trying to provide as much forage as possible, or having them eat for long periods of time. They were designed to eat a lot of the day on forage. So if we can achieve that and keep them chewing, they produce saliva that helps buffer the stomach acid, so that can help. We can also provide some additional gastric buffers. So there are supplements out there that we can add to the feed, or may be included already in the feed, that can help neutralize some of that gastric acid. And so that can help reduce some of the risk associated with developing ulcers. But again, you probably also need to work with your veterinarian. If you think you've already got ulcers, then work with your vet and having treatment. But from a prevention standpoint, making sure we can provide them with forage, extending the amount of time they eat, getting them to chew, producing saliva, that also can help buffer the stomach and provides protection.
And since Catherine's being a good panelist and not promoting her own company, I'll do it for her. So there are supplements that Kentucky Equine Research offers that are really good for buffering hindgut. I think, is it Equisure?
Yep, Equisure.
Yep. And so again, working with your veterinarian to make sure that it's the right product for your horse and the right, that it's not just wasted supplement, but their website has tons of great information on helping prevent ulcers, and there's articles that I found on your site that are phenomenal. So again, I will promote for her, because I know I appreciate you not being up there and being a salesperson, but I do know that KER does have some good products for that specific use that I've had success with.
All right, any other questions? Okay, well, we are, I think we've